KMSU.
Yes, hi. Is this Dustin?
Yes, it is.
Well, this is Roscoe Orman. How are you?
I am good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, too. Thanks. Did you want to do the interview right now?
Yeah. Do you think you have a few minutes?
Yeah, sure. This would be a good time, actually.
All right. Well, we'll get started here. First of all, I'm here with my co-host, Ton.
Hey there, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm glad we got you on the line here. This is very exciting stuff.
Great, thanks. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, no problem. Yes, if you're ready to go, we can start just asking you some questions. I guess the first big one would be, how did you just kind of get started in acting, I guess, and what you're doing?
Oh, well, the acting career began when I was just a teenager. I really had been influenced primarily by my grandfather, who was a vaudeville performer back in the 1920s. And, he, to a large extent, raised me. You know, he was like a very important figure in my life. And just listening to the stories of his short-lived but very impassioned career, he was very passionate about performing, and it just infected me and kind of, I guess, instilled in me the desire to follow in his footsteps. And I performed in plays all through school and was discovered by some people who were moonlighting as teachers but were actually producers and theater people, and they asked me to try out for a production that they were mounting later that year. And I asked my folks, and they said, sure. And I did it, and that was my start. You know, I was hadn't even graduated high school, and I was appearing off-Broadway in New York City, a play called If We Grow Up. Those people became mentors to me and advised me in terms of study. I went to Circle and Square Acting School, Manhattan School of Music, and I guess, as they say, the rest is history. I've really hardly done much of anything else other than be an artist in theater, and performing artist primarily.
And obviously the big role that people know you for, Gordon from Sesame Street. Tell us a little bit about how you wound up playing that.
Yeah, by the time I was approached by the Sesame Street people, of course, Sesame Street began in 1969. My career began in 1962. I was approached to do the Gordon role in 1974. By then, I had been a veteran of stage and some TV, not very little TV, actually. But one major feature film, which for me was major, was a Universal Studios production in which I played the title role. It was kind of the tail end of the genre which became known as the blaxploitation era of films. And I did a movie called Willie Dynamite.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah.
And I was Willie Dynamite. So, I'd had, a successful run of doing primarily theater. I was with theater companies, the Free Southern Theater in New Orleans for 2 years, the New Lafayette Theater of Harlem for 5 years, and then many other, theatrical productions, mostly in New York, but around the country in the regional theater as well. So by the time the Sesame Street people, had asked me to come in and try out, I'd done quite a bit of acting. I also, at the same time, was about to become a father for the first time. So the idea of doing a children's show, which probably a year or two earlier would have been really a very odd thing for me, suddenly was not as odd because I was dealing with fatherhood and the prospect of having little kids around. And so the timing of it was perfect for me.
Yeah.
And they producers, had me come back a few times, and I did an audition with Oscar the Grouch, which was probably as tough an assignment as I could imagine at that time. But I also had a portion of my audition with a young, at that time, really popular child on the show, and his name was John Williams. He did great one-on-one little vignettes with Kermit the Frog and Harry Monster and Big Bird, and he was really quite an adorable and very outgoing, joyful, bright child who was kind of a little star on Sesame Street. So he kind of carried me through the audition, I guess. We had a great time, and the producers liked what they saw, and they offered me the job. I figured this would be a nice, steady gig for an actor for a few years. And as I said, that was in 1974, and I've just I'm now completing my 38th season on Sesame Street.
Wow.
one of the fortunate things about it is that it takes so little of my time, on an annual basis. It's even back in its heyday in terms of the length of taping seasons, it was only at the height, it was 7 or 8 months a year, and that was not for very long. Now we're down to just a few months out of the year.
Okay.
So it leaves me a lot of time to do other, ventures in terms of theater and film and writing and, other interests that I have. So it's been a great fit for me.
Yeah, you mentioned when you auditioned with Oscar the Grouch. Do you think it's difficult acting with the Muppets, or instead of just actual people, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a very different mindset. You have to, first of all, be able to, like children do, suspend your disbelief. Children, they believe in those characters. When they look at Elmo or Oscar or Big Bird, they don't see a puppeteer. They don't think of it as they're able to make believe in that way and really relate to that character as a real person. And for a grown-up, that's a bit of a stretch, unless you're someone who does that all the time, or that's a part of how you your concept of what acting is. It's make believe, which all of it is. But when you're used to working with real people, other actors like yourself, and you have a puppet in front of you, it's a little disconcerting. I've seen some Academy Award-winning actors on the show who come and do guest spots and don't have a clue as to how to do it. Because it's so odd for them.
Yeah.
To look at this, what they think of as an inanimate object with lips flapping and a voice coming from somewhere, and they don't make the connection. And they can't just relax and get into it and really communicate with this thing. And I had that experience in my audition with Oscar, and I figured at that point, I said, well, I blew this gig, and there's no way I'm going to get this. But I think John saved me. And of course, since then, I learned mostly from the kids of how to relate to puppets and how to really, embrace that whole, the magic of it.
Yeah.
Which is what it is. It's really magical.
Well, as you mentioned, you've been on the show going on 38 years. This is probably an odd question, but is there a favorite Muppet that you like working with, or any favorite memories of the show that you can share with us? Or?
Well, I really love all of the puppeteers, by the way, are some of the most incredible performing artists that I've ever worked with, and we've all become like a family anyway. So I really just love all of my colleagues on the show. We just really have a great chemistry among us all. And there are some that I've found to be more stimulating than others. I think the one that has challenged me the most, especially back in the day when Frank Oz was performing, who I think is probably the best puppeteer I've ever worked with. Frank, of course, did Grover. And Grover was one of my favorite characters because of his kind of loony, just zany personality, but, continually self-absorbed and believing in himself, even though he wasn't really good at doing many things. But in his mind, he was super, always. So I kind of admired that. But I also found him to be the most hilarious of the characters. And that humor came from Frank and Frank's ability to improvise. And improvisation is something I've always enjoyed. But, when you're working with someone like Frank Oz, who has the advantage of having a puppet on his hand when he's doing it, it really makes you it stretches you as a performer. So I always enjoyed that challenge of working with Grover. And Cookie Monster as well, who was another one of Frank's characters.
Yeah.
They're just these characters that are obsessed with something, and you never know what is going to come your way from them.
You mentioned, obviously Sesame Street has been on for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
and you've been on there for many years, and there's many generations of kids around the world now that you've really influenced. What do you think about that, I guess, being kind of a role model for all these kids?
Well, I guess it was around sometime in the 1980s that I realized, that what you're talking about, that phenomenon of the fact that there were people who were growing up, who felt pretty much the same way towards me and my fellow Sesame Street performers as I felt about, Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy and Captain Kangaroo and
Yeah.
Buffalo Bob and all these characters from my childhood, and some of whom I met later in life and was just speechless, because these are people who shaped my entire childhood. And I see that in the eyes. I began to see it in the eyes of young people, teenagers, in the 1980s. Mostly when I was touring and performing live, like concerts around the U.S. and Canada. Particularly in Canada, I think they're really huge. They really get it up in Canada. They get the Sesame Street thing, and so they have a different level of worship for Sesame Street and all of us who are on the show. I encountered one group, actually was warned about them when I went to Edmonton back in the 80s, and I was told that I will be seeing, probably in person, but definitely being told about it, seeing it in ads, print ads, of a group of college kids who had an improvisational comedy troupe, and they titled their troupe Gordon's Big Bald Head. Yeah.
Man.
And I didn't quite know what to think of that. But when I met them, I realized that it was a form of hero worship, that the fact that they had named their troupe after my head. Was pretty flattering, and kind of, doesn't happen to many people. So, yeah, but I've always been really moved and touched by that, and also felt a great deal of responsibility, towards the audience, as all of us on Sesame Street do, in terms of really maintaining that level of commitment to being an educational and truly, wholesome form of entertainment, that people can grow up feeling that way about.
Definitely.
And, so it's an honor and a privilege, and still a lot of fun.
Now, when you're up in Canada, do these guys realize that Gordon from Sesame Street is also Willie Dynamite? Does anybody ever make that connection? Or?
Every now and then. And I think for those who are really hip and really cool, to them that puts another big feather in my cap. That fact that Gordon could be Willie Dynamite too.
Yeah,
like,
that's awesome.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah. And actually that's increased over the years, because those films from that era, Willie Dynamite included, have become, cult films, and people who were born after those films were made, now, they're on DVD or they're on YouTube, or, and, I've got a bunch of Facebook fans and friends who just tell me that it's their number one movie of all time,
This is kind of off subject, but one of my favorite shows is Sanford and Son, and one of my favorite episodes where they robbed the bank, and you played one of the robbers, right?
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite jobs. I mean, working with Red Fox who I was a huge fan of. He's a guy who is even funnier when you're standing in front of him than when you see him on TV. I mean, it took a whole week of rehearsing with him because I was a straight man. I was a bank robber. I had to be kind of serious. But I could not keep a straight face because this was Red Fox, and he was just the funniest person I've ever met, and he would purposely try to crack you up, So it was really one of my favorite jobs, and he was a sweet guy, too, really sweet.
That's awesome. Well, besides the TV show and working in theater, you have a few books out that you've written, too, is that right?
Yeah, I wrote a memoir, I guess about 10 years ago or so, and then I wrote a children's book. I was also in school, mostly through school, I was into the visual art stuff, and I always drew and painted. I went to Special High School of Art and Design. So, before I was introduced to the idea of becoming a professional actor, I thought I would be a visual artist. So I got the chance with my children's book to illustrate my children's book myself, which, was a great opportunity for me to use those skills as well. And I'd like to do more. Actually, I do have another project that I've completed, and I'm looking to do more of that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, tell us what else you have coming up or other upcoming projects.
Well, as far as outside of the writing and the books and the illustrations, I'm still doing theater, and I'm trying to be more of the proactive type of entertainer, where I'm creating my own projects and producing. And I've also got a documentary film production company with a partner, and we're doing some projects together. One of them is really exciting about the history of black jockeys in the U.S., which is a little-known history, but it's just a phenomenal part of what that sport is all about. That black jockeys really created the sport, to a large extent.
Wow.
So there's that, and then theater projects always, because that's really become my first love, is being on stage, live theater with that audience right there every night. It's like a great jazz musician. I think they all love playing the clubs. I mean, going in the studio is cool, and they make money, and they get to jam with each other. But when you're in front of a live audience, the performance changes every night. You're always expanding and growing and finding new shades and colors, and it's great. I just love that part of being an actor, being a theater person, and sharing that with your fellow actors each night too. It's really thrilling and expanding. I always look forward to doing another, even though it's getting harder to learn lines as I get older, and maintain the brain. The brain is too full for all these new things to be crammed in there, but it's still probably my most favorite thing to do, being in a play.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we got to say it's been a real honor having you on with us. Is there anything you want to leave with us? Any final words? Or
Well, one of the things is, if there are any words of wisdom, every now and then people ask me, what advice I might give young people out there, and I almost always say the same thing: is find something you love and see if you can make a living at it. And that's pretty much what I've done. I've found something I truly love to do. I've never really worked a day in my life when I think about it that way. I've never felt like I have to get up and go to work and do my job. No, and Sesame Street has an amazing, fun-filled journey. Highs and lows, but definitely a labor of love. And all of us who have been at it together for all these years, we're like family. So it really is a love thing. We're all really connected in a way that I never could have imagined. As a group of performers who have come to symbolize something very special, I think.
Yeah, awesome.
Where are you broadcasting from? You're in Minnesota, is it?
Yeah, Minnesota.
Which town?
We're in Mankato, South Central, about an hour from
South Minnesota.
Yep.
Okay, I love Minnesota. And back when I was doing a lot of touring, I do Minneapolis, and I did Bemidji once.
Oh yeah.
Bemidji, which was it's one of the highlights of my touring career.
Huh.
at the Paul Bunyan Shopping Center.
Yeah.
Yep. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like an hour south of Minneapolis.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot, Roscoe.
It's been awesome.
Great.
Great. My pleasure. I had a good time, too. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
You guys take care.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye now.